Welcome to solverfy.
$13.50, we know that sharp knives cut better than dull knives, otherwise there'd be no point in ever sharpening anything. In fact, you might deliberately dull knives and other cutting tools to make them cut better, or if they cut equally well, you would just not worry about it. But they do cut better, and so we want to try and explain why this is. And it will help if we first of all think about what it means for something to be sharp. And so if a cutting edge is sharp, then you have two surfaces that in a sort of cross section meet together at a point, and along the length of the entire blade, it's a line that all these points form. But we can just think of a two-dimensional cross section here where they're meeting at a point. And then as this gets dulled, so this sort of point here is relatively fragile because the thickness of material here is less. And so as you use the knife, this point rounds over, and then what happens when you sharpen it using abrasives or something, or the only way of sharpening things is with abrasives if they're hard enough. Anyway, is you remove a layer of metal from the knife so that the edges, the sides of the blade meet together at a point again at the edge. And we can sort of see here what the problem is. This is not actually ever going to be a point because matter is made out of atoms. So this will have some width, but it's less width than in this case. And so having less width multiplied by the entire length of the cutting edge means there's less area. And when it's dull, there's more area. So if you exert the same force to try and cut something, then the sharp knife will have a greater pressure at its cutting edge because the cutting edge is a well-defined line or close to being a line, and so it has much less area, and so the pressure is much greater and it can cut through things more easily than if it's dull and you have this greater surface area here that you're trying to push into something, and so the force is more spread out, and so it doesn't cut as effectively. So the sharp knife has greater pressure at cutting edge. And basically different materials require, some specific amount of pressure to start cutting into them. But regardless of what that is, so which is why with the same knife with the same sharpness, you might need to exert more force to cut through some things than through others. But if you're applying the same amount of force, the pressure is greater here. And so, I mean, the sort of other way around with that is that you have to apply less force to get the minimum cutting pressure with a sharp knife than you do with a dull knife, which is why it's easier or cuts better.